Well, I'm going to try now to go through I'm in awe of this project. This is not easy. To carry us through the adventure that leads us from just the experiences of the day through this brothels chapter, where hallucinations interlock with actualities. And the hallucinations are echoing the unconscious system, principally of Bloom, but Stephen also. But the real hero here is Leopold Bloom in his passage. The event in the maternity hospital, which we talked about yesterday, has concluded, and the young men have left the maternity hospital and headed for the brothels. At least Stephen Dedalus, Kinch, and his friend Lynch, who's his crony, also in the portrait. Apparently it was with Lynch that he worked out his theorizing and so forth. They head for the brothels, and Bloom, thinking, this young man's going to get in trouble here, with his paternal solicitude, starts following them and loses track of them, and then has to find where they are, and the story goes on. It starts now with the picture of this area of Dublin, this red light area, as though it were Circe's isle. Now, Circe's great mansion is, she's the one who turns men into swine, is in the middle of a great swamp, and it's very unpleasant. And I'll just read the opening paragraph. It's written in the form of a play. The technique is that of a playwright, and the setting of this street as we go into it. And you're to think of Circe's mansion in the midst of swamp with grunting animals around who are transformed men, and so forth and so on. The Mabbott Street entrance of Nighttown, before which stretches an uncobbled tram siding set with skeleton tracks, underworld, skeletal themes, red and green will-o'-the-wisps and danger signals, rows of flimsy houses with gaping doors, rare lamps with faint rainbow fans. Round Rabiotti's halted ice gondola, stunted men and women squabble. They grab wafers between which are wedged lumps of coal and copper snow. Sucking, they scatter slowly. Children. The swanscom of the gondola, high-reared, forges on through the murk, white and blue under a lighthouse. Whistles call and answer. The calls. Wait, my love, and I'll be with you. The answers. Round behind the stable. And so this is the world that we're going into, with the whores and the doorways inviting and so forth and so on. And then there are a couple of soldiers there, Private Compton and Private Carr, a couple of British soldiers who are going to play a big role at the end. The finale for Stephen is that he's knocked down on the street by a couple of soldiers, these two. And in the analogy, it's the Roman soldier piercing the side of Christ on the cross. So the Mass with which we open, when Buck Mulligan says, Introibo ad altare Dei, I go into the altar of God, is culminating here. This is a black Mass. And what the Mass is the crucifixion of Jesus. It is the celebration of the crucifixion of Jesus, and in terms of the mystical ideology, is the crucifixion of Jesus. The host and the wine are literally the body and blood of Jesus Christ, and the Christ is killed, and he becomes then the food of our spiritual life. Now, Stephen is turning himself into that role. And he's still pretty much an ego here. And as he's walking through all this filth, with the soldiers picking up whores and so forth and so on, He, with his ash plant, with his stick, is chanting the introit for Paschal time. That is to say, for the Good Friday and Easter Sunday Mass. Vidi aquam egregientem de templo a latere dextro, alleluia. He's going through the brothels chanting Latin. And then the answer to that is, aboard, her voice whispering huskily, "Shh, come here, I tell you, Maidenhead inside. Shh. Stephen, et omnes ad quos pervenit ac Christ." Well, he goes in as Christ going to the cross. Salvi facti sunt. Bloom, meanwhile, gets quite lost. And he stops in a butcher shop to buy some little bits of meat. I really don't get the explanation of why he does that, but he feeds it to a dog that's following him here. His compassion for this poor dog and so forth and so on. And now he's looking, where the devil did those two guys go that I'm trying to find? He's plunging forward again. He stops before a lighted house, listening. The kisses, winging from their bowers, fly about him, twittering, warbling, cooing. The kisses, warbling. Leo, twittering, icky, licky, nicky, sticky for Leo, cooing, coo, 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 yum, yum, wum, wum, warbling. Big, combing, pirouette, Leo Popold, twittering, Leo. So this is all cooing around, but he's stopping in front of this whorehouse because he has heard through an open window somebody playing open fifths on the piano. And Bloom, a man's touch, sad music, church music, perhaps here. Zoe Higgins, a young whore in a sapphire slip, closed with 3 bronze buckles, a slim black velvet fillet round her throat, nods, trips down the steps, and accosts him. Zoe, are you looking for someone? He's inside with his friend. Bloom, is this Mrs. Max? Wow, he knows where he is. So this isn't quite as innocent as it may sound. Zoe, no, 81, Mrs. Cohen's. You might go farther and fare worse. Mother Slipper Slapper, familiarly. She's on the job herself tonight with the vet, her tipster, that gives her all the winners and pays for her son in Oxford. Now, this is a bit of information that is going to stand Bloom in good stead a little later. Working overtime, but her luck's turned today, suspiciously. You're not his father, are you? Not I, says Bloom. You both in black, she says. Has little Mousie any tickles tonight? And she begins feeling him up a little bit, and the two enter the building. Now, just as he enters the whorehouse, the church chimes toll midnight. And so he is entering Blue Muslim to the sound of church bells, and you have a whole system of illusory celebrations. Everybody, Lord Mayor of Dublin greets him as he goes up. His whole imagination, well, I don't know. He's in a strange situation, certainly, and his imagination is activated with church chimes to help him feel that this is a grand, grand thing. Torch bearers, Lord Mayor Harrington, Councillor Larkin Sherlock, Bloom, and prolonged applause, Venetian mass, maypoles and festal arches spring up. A streamer bearing the legends, Shad Mel Fealty and Mach Melech Israel spans the street. All the windows are thronged with sightseers, chiefly ladies. Along the route, regiments of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, the King's Own Scottish Borderers, the Cameron Highlanders, and the Welsh Fusiliers, standing to attention, keep back the crowd. Boys from high school are perched on the lampposts, telegraph poles, windowsills, cornices, gutters, chimney pots, railings, rain spouts, whistling and cheering. The pillar of cloud appears, a fife and drum band. So he's having quite an experience. And this goes on for pages. Now, one of the characteristics of Ulysses is everything's just a bit too long. You know, and that's part of the idea, that it's a fagging, tiring thing. And the details are precise. So now we're going into the room where Stephen has been playing open fifths on the piano. Why is he playing open fifths? Well, he'll explain it later. I'll let him do it. Zoe crosses the threshold. Bloom hesitates. She turns and, holding out her hands, draws him over. He hops. On the antlered rack of the hall hang a man's hat and waterproof. Now this is an important motif at a later moment. You know those old Victorian front hall racks where there's a mirror and then a hat rack on either side, and the hat rack made of antlers. Later on, Bloom is going to be reflected in that, horned with the antlers as a cuckold, you see. Now, this is all with somebody's hat hanging on it besides. Bloom uncovers himself, but seeing the hat and waterproof, frowns, then smiles, preoccupied, thinking about his own home at this moment with Molly. A door on the return landing is thrown open. A man in purple shirt and gray trousers, brown sock, passes with an ape's gait, his bald head and goatee, beard upheld, hugging a full water jug, his two-tailed black braces hanging at his heels. Averting his face quickly, Bloom bends to examine on the hall table the spaniel eyes of a running fox. That's a fox head that's there and so forth. And he enters the brothel. And there are three whores, Kitty and Zoe and Florrie. Kitty representing mineral, Florrie vegetable, and Zoe animal, the three whores. And Stephen is there playing the open fifths, talking to Lynch. The reason is because the fundamental and the dominant, do, re, mi, fa, sol, are separated by the greatest possible interval, which is the greatest possible ellipse consistent with the ultimate return, the octave. So he is at the extreme of his departure from the bass. And now he's going to be on the way home. Open fifths. This is the extreme of my separation from the Father. The tonic is the Father, or the ground, or the bass, or the drone. And he has separated himself as far as he can. And so he realizes this is the moment of the crucifixion. This is the moment of the sun at the apogee of its climb in the heavens, about to be crucified, about to go. I have gone as far as I can in this egoistic single way of mine. Now, this is just what he's thinking when the door opens and Bloom comes in. And there's a gramophone being played outside, playing The Holy City. Nice coincidence of events. And Stephen then says, just about the time Bloom is coming in, what went forth to the ends of the world to traverse not itself, God, the Son, Shakespeare, a commercial traveler, Bloom, having itself traversed in reality itself, becomes that self. Wait a moment, wait a second, damn that fellow's noise in the street. Self, which it itself was ineluctably preconditioned to become. Echo. Lynch, with a mocking whinny of laughter, grins at Bloom and Zoe Higgins as they come in. What a learned speech, eh? And Zoe then says to him briskly, God help your head, he knows more than you've forgotten. Then with obese stupidity, Florrie Talbot regards Stephen. Florrie, they say the last day is coming this summer. So we're at the moment of the end of the world. And what is the end of the world? The end of the world is the end of your particular attitude toward the world. Now, this brings up a theme that we were just talking about a moment ago. In Mark 13, Jesus predicts the end of the world as though it were going to be a historical event. And he tells us what's going to happen at that time. That's what is being talked about here. This is the end of the world. But now in this fifth gospel, which has been dug up out of the Egyptian desert, the gospel according to Thomas, the last saying in it is, when the disciples asked Jesus, when will the kingdom come? When will this moment come that we're waiting for now? And Jesus replies as follows, the kingdom will not come by expectation. They will not say, see here, see there. The kingdom of the Father is spread upon the earth, and men do not see it. Now, this was dug up in 1945, but this is what Joyce is doing with the whole symbology of the church, translating it into the Gnostic mode, where the crisis is not to be literal, historical, but psychological in your life. And when that happens, the normal, differentiated world dissolves, and the one unity world is experienced. As I said, this is the function of art to show that. It's the function of this chapter that we're in to have Stephen experience it in relation to Bloom. What do you think now? He has already had a little thing to say just on exactly this theme. When we're in, where are we in this thing now? Just one little minute. Page 204, 205. Oh, yes. When we're in the library, and he's talking about Shakespeare and the cuckolding of Shakespeare and so forth, he quotes Maeterlinck as follows, if Socrates leave his house today, he will find the sage seated on his doorstep. If Judas go forth tonight, it is to Judas his steps will turn. And that's just what Stephen has now said when Bloom comes in. That which went forth to the ends of the world has traversed really himself. The world that you experience is a projection of your own potentiality, and what you seek will be yourself. So this is what he's saying at the time of Bloom's coming in. No sooner does he say this than he turns and sees Bloom. There's a coincidence here of event and readiness to experience the event. Then we have the gramophone blaring out, Jerusalem, open your gates and sing, Hosanna. A rocket rushes up to the sky and bursts. A white star falls from it. This is the psychological crisis. Stephen has recognized himself in Bloom. And that's the end of his separateness, in fact. Now, he's ready for something of this kind, and he's already had a moment with Bloom in the maternity hospital where you might say this possibility was conceived, and now it actually takes place. Stephen now is pretty darn drunk, and he's off in a corner, and what he sees is Manannán MacLír, the Irish god of the ocean depths, who is identical with the ocean gods of every culture of the world, and finally also with Shiva. Poseidon and Neptune and all. Manannán Mac Lir emerges with a voice of waves. Aum, Hek, Wal, Ak, Lub, Mor, Ma, white yogi of the gods, occult Pimander of Hermes Trismegistus, with a voice of whistling sea wind, Punar Janam Patsi Punjab. I won't have my leg pulled. It has been said by one, beware the left, the cult of Shakti, with a cry of storm birds. Shakti, Shiva, dark hidden father. He smites with the bicycle pump a crayfish that's in his left hand. Now this crayfish, that's cancer. That's what Stephen's mother has died of. And the bicycle pump is symbolic of prana, spiritus, the breath. By the way, Punarjanam, these are transformations of Sanskrit. Punarjanam is born again. Patsi Punjab is going into death, going into the five. So all this Oriental stuff's coming up in Stephen's mind. Stephen knows this material, and he's mentioned aspects of it before. He smites with his bicycle pump the crayfish in his left hand. On its cooperative dial glow the 12 signs of the zodiac. He wails with the vehemence of an ocean. Aum, baum, pijam. I am the light of the homestead. I'm the dreamery, creamery butter. Now in the rituals of India, instead of the host, which is broken and eaten, the butter soaked into cotton is ignited. So this is the counterpart, the dreamery, creamery butter of the crucifixion. A skeleton Judas hand strangles the light. The green light wanes to mauve. The gas jet wails, whistling the gas jet. Foo, fooey. Zoe runs to the chandelier and, crooking her leg, adjusts the mantle. Zoe, who has a fag as I'm here? Lynch, here. Well, how are we going to light this thing again? The light goes out and they light it again. Well then, now we're coming, or are we? Yes, we are. We're coming to the crisis. The whores begin reading palms. They think that's a nice, fun game. And they reach for Stephen's palm, and the horse says, do you want me to tell you something about what's coming? And Bloom, then to protect Stephen, says, no, take my palm. And then they start reading Bloom's palm, and they see a mark on the palm, and he says, oh, that wheel there is an accident. I fell and cut it 22 years ago. I was 16. And Zoe then says, I see, says the blind man, tell us news. Now the blind man is Stephen. When Stephen hears that, he says to himself, see, all moves to one great goal. I am now 22. 16 years ago, I, 22, tumbled. 22 years ago, he, 16, fell off his hobby horse. He winces. Hurt my hand somewhere. Must see a dentist. Money. Zoe whispers to Florrie. They giggle. They're looking at Zoe's hand. Bloom releases his hand and writes idly on the table in backhand, penciling slow curves. Florrie. What? Then some images in Bloom's mind. The fact is, they're recognizing in his palm that he's cuckolded, that his wife is running the house, and they begin giggling and laughing. And then he has coming into his mind an image of Boylan with Molly, a totally foul experience for him of imagining what's going on in there. And then finally, Lynch sees Bloom reflected in that mirror in the hall with the antlers, and begins laughing. Lynch points the mirror and says, "The mirror up to nature." He laughs, hoo, 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 hoo. Stephen and Bloom gaze in the mirror. The face of William Shakespeare appears there, beardless, rigid in facial paralysis, crowned by the reflection of the reindeer antlered hat rack in the hall. Shakespeare, in dignified ventriloquy, "'Tis the loud laugh bespeaks the vacant mind." And to Bloom, "Thou thoughtest as how thou wastest invisible. Gaze." He crows with a black capon's laugh. "Iago go. How my old fellow choked at his Thursday momum. Iago go." Bloom, "When will I hear the joke?" Well, it's at that time that Stephen takes it upon himself to distract everybody. And he shouts out, "Et exaltabuntur cornua justi," and the horns of the just shall be exalted. And then he starts this crazy speech. "Queens lay with prize bulls. Remember Pasiphae, for whose lust my grand gross father made the first confession box. Forget not so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so." Bella doesn't like this. The horn says, "None of that here. You come to the wrong shop with that kind of talk." And Lynch says, "Let him alone. He's back from Paris." And so says, "Go on, give us some parlez-vous." And Stephen then goes into a kind of ecstatic dance and speech-making, largely to save Bloom from this shame. He starts a dance. Outside you can hear the sound of those two British soldiers, the noise in the street, Private Carr, Private Compton with Sissy Caffrey. And in the midst of all this, everybody dancing, the phonograph going, Stephen says, "The dance of death," and there appears to him his mother, his dead mother. This is in the American edition on page 564, and in the Paris on 542. It's a big moment. Stephen's mother, emaciated, rises stark through the floor in leper gray with a wreath of faded orange blossoms and a torn bridal veil, her face worn and noseless, green with grave mold. Her hair is scant and lank. She fixes her blue circled hollow eye sockets on Stephen, opens her toothless mouth, uttering a silent word. A choir of angels and confessors sing voicelessly the choir. Liliata rutilantium te confessorum, jubilantium te virginum. These are prayers from the prayers for the dying that Stephen heard read over his mother. And it's a beautiful prayer, actually, saying, "You are coming to heaven, and you will be greeted by the choruses of the martyrs and the virgins," and so forth and so on. It's a very pretty sort of welcome home to heaven that is echoing in Stephen's mind. And then we have a number of figures who appear here, but the mother then comes closer, breathing upon him softly, her breath of wetted ashes. "All must go through it, Stephen. More women than men in the world. You too. Time will come." Stephen, choking with fright, remorse, and horror. "They say I killed you, mother. He offended your memory. Cancer did it, not I. Destiny." The mother, a green rill of bile trickling from the side of her mouth. "You sang that song to me, love's bitter mystery." Stephen, eagerly, "Tell me the word, mother, if you know now, the word known to all men." The mother, the word is mother love. "Who saved you the night you jumped into the train at Dalkey with Paddy Lee? Who had pity for you when you were sad among the strangers? Prayer is all-powerful. Prayer for the suffering souls in the Ursuline Manual and 40 Days Indulgence. Repent, Stephen. The ghoul, hyena, says Stephen. I pray for you in my other world. Get Dilly to make you that boiled rice every night after your brain work. Years and years I loved you, O my son, my firstborn, when you lay in my womb." Zoe, fanning herself. "I'm melting." Florrie points to Stephen. "Look, he's going white." Bloom goes to the window to open it some more. Giddy, the mother, "Repent." "Oh, the fire of hell." Stephen, panting. "Corpse chewer, raw head and bloody bones." The mother, her face drawing nearer and nearer, sending out an ashen breath. "Beware." She raises her blackened, withered arms slowly towards Stephen's breast with outstretched fingers. Beware God's hand. A green crab with malignant red eyes sticks deep its grinning claws in Stephen's heart. Stephen, strangled with rage, shite, and his features grow drawn and gray and old. Bloom at the window. What? Stephen, en non par exemple, the intellectual imagination, with me all or not at all, non serviam, I will not serve, that's the word of Satan. Florrie, give him some cold water. Wait, she rushes out. The mother wrings her hands slowly, moaning desperately. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on him. Save him from hell, O Divine Sacred Heart. Stephen, no, no, no. Break my spirit, all of you, if you can. I'll bring you all to heal. The mother, in the agony of her death rattle, have mercy on Stephen, Lord, for my sake. Inexpressible was my anguish when expiring with love, grief, and agony on Mount Calvary. Stephen, not tongue. He lifts his ash plant high with both hands and smashes the chandelier. Time's livid final flame leaps, and in the following darkness, ruin of all space, shattered glass, and toppling masonry. The gas jet, fug. Bloom, stop. Lynch rushes forward and seizes Stephen's hand. Here, hold on, don't run amok. Bella, police. Stephen, abandoning his ash plant, his head and arms thrown back stock, beats the ground and flees from the room past the horse and out the door. So we're out on the street, and there's a lot going on. Stephen has got into a row with the soldiers. And a woman says, the two of them have one whore between them, and this woman says that Stephen has insulted her. And Private Compton says, biff him, Harry. Stephen, to Private Compton, I don't know your name, but you're quite right. Dr. Swift says 1 man in armor will beat 10 men in their shirts. Shirt is a sindochi, part for the whole. Sissy Caffrey to the crowd. No, I was with the private. Stephen, amiably. Why not? The bold soldier boy. In my opinion, every lady, for example, Private Carr, his caporai, advancing to Stephen. Say, how would it be, Governor, if I was to bash in your jaw? Stephen looks up at the sky. How? Very unpleasant. No noble art of self-pretense. Personally, I detest action. He waves his hand. Hand hurts me slightly. Enfin, ce sont vos oignons. To Sissy Caffrey. Some trouble is on here. What is it precisely? And Bloom arrives. Come now, Professor. Get away out of this. Why should I not speak to him, says Stephen, or to any other human being who walks upright upon this oblate orange? He points his finger. I'm not afraid of what I can talk to if I see his eye, retaining the perpendicular. He staggers back a pace. Bloom, retain your own. Stephen, my center of gravity is displaced. I've forgotten the trick. Let us sit down somewhere and discuss. Struggle for life is the law of existence, but modern philironists, notably the Tsar and the King of England, have invented arbitration. He taps his brow. But in here it is, I must kill the priest and the king. Did you hear what the professor said? Calls out Biddy the Cap. He's a professor out of college. Cunty Cake says, I did, I heard that. Biddy the Clap says, he expresses himself with much marked refinement of phraseology. And another one of the whores, indeed, yes. And then Private Carr pulls himself free, comes forward. What's that you're saying about my king? Edward VII appears in an archway. He wears a white jersey on which an image of the Sacred Heart is stitched, with the insignia of garter and thistle, golden fleece, elephant of Denmark, Skinner's and Corbin's horse, Lincoln in Bencher, and ancient and honorable artillery company of Massachusetts. He sucks a red jujube. He is robed as grand, elect, perfect, and sublime mason with trowel and apron, marked, made in Germany. In his left hand, he holds a plasterer's bucket on which is printed, Défense d'Uriner. A roar of welcome greets him. Edward VII, slowly, solemnly, but indistinctly, peace, perfect peace, and so forth and so on. Private Carr says to Stephen, say it again. Stephen, nervous, friendly, pulls himself. I understand your point of view, though I have no king myself for the moment. This is the age of patent medicine. A discussion is difficult down here, but this is the point. You die for your country, suppose. He places his arm on Private Carr's sleeve. Not that I wish it for you, but I say, let my country die for me. Up to the present, it has done so. I don't want it to die. Damn death, long live life. Edward VII, my methods are new and are causing surprise. To make the blind see, I throw dust in their eyes. Stephen, kings and unicorns, come somewhere and we'll... What was that girl saying, Private Compton? Hey, Harry, give him a kick in the knackers. Stick one into Jerry. Bloom, he doesn't know what he's saying, talking and so forth. Bloom trying to console them. Gentleman, patriot, scholar, and judge of impostors, says Stephen. Private, I don't give a bugger who he is. Private Compton, we don't give a bugger who he is. And Stephen, I seem to annoy them. Green rag to a bull. Kevin Egan, an Irish patriot, appears in black Spanish tasseled shirt. Kevin Egan, lo, bonjour, la vieille ogresse with the dents jaunes. That's Queen Victoria, the old ogress with the yellow teeth. Patrice Egan peeps from behind. Patrice, socialist, so forth, so on. And finally then, we have the imagery of a black mass being said, and at the end of the mass, the soldier, Private Carr, says, I'll insult him. And he rushes towards Stephen, fists outstretched, strikes him in the face. Stephen totters, collapses, falls stunned, lies prone, his face to the sky, his hat rolling to the wall. Bloom follows and picks up the hat. Stephen, in his pride, wiped out, lying now. Bloom rescues him and takes him home. First, he takes him to a sort of cabman's shelter. I mean, we're now around 2 o'clock in the morning, and an all-night little coffee shop where the taxi drivers, only they have carriages instead of automobiles, where they stop for the night, and Bloom and Stephen go in there for a cup of coffee or something. But it is such lousy coffee that Bloom can't bear to have Stephen have to say that. It's a strange and wonderful scene with all these driftwood people there, just the shag ends of the night and the shag ends of the world, and an old sailor comes and talks about his adventures and so forth. And then Bloom says, come, let's go home to my place. Now we're coming to this finale. Bloom proposes that Stephen and he should go home. And he takes Stephen home, and the chapter is written in the style of a kind of scientific language. What parallel courses did Bloom and Stephen follow returning? Starting united both at normal walking pace from Beresford Place, they followed in the order named Lower and Middle Gardiner Streets and Mountjoy Square West. Then at reduced pace, each bearing left, Gardiner's Place by an inadvertence as far as the farthest corner of Temple Street North. Then at reduced pace with interruptions of halt, bearing right, Temple Street North as far as Hardwick's Place. Approaching disparate at relaxed walking pace, they crossed both the circus before George's Church diametrically, the chord in any circle being less than the arc, which is subtends. So with this long, long way of describing the thing, you see we're heavy. It's late at night. Everything is slow. We go from one place to another until we come to Bloom's house. And then Bloom remembers that in changing his trousers to put on the black suit for the funeral, he had left his key in his trouser pocket. So he doesn't have a key, but he doesn't know the secret entrance. So he lets himself down into the cellar entrance and goes in and opens the door to Stephen, and they enter. Then they sit talking, and Bloom serves Stephen cocoa made with the milk or cream reserved for Molly. In other words, he's taken a new position with respect to Molly. And he invites Stephen to spend the night, and Stephen very politely says no. He would not, he'll leave. And so the two go out into the yard and they urinate. This is the dog motif, dog body, Stephen's dog body and so forth. And then Stephen departs into the night. How did they take leave, one of the other, in separation? Standing perpendicular at the same door and on different sides of its base, the lines of their valedictory arms meeting at any point and forming any angle less than the sum of two right angles. What sound accompanied the union of their tangent, the disunion of their respectively centrifugal and centripetal hands? The sound of the peal of the hour of the night by the chime of the bells of the Church of St. George. What echoes of that sound were by both and each heard by Stephen, Liliata rutilantium turmace cumdat jubilantium teva genam chorus excipiat. By Bloom, hi-ho, 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 hi-ho. And then Stephen departs into the night, and Bloom starts upstairs to go to bed with Molly. Well, he begins bumping his head on things. She has moved all the furniture around. It's perfectly dark, and he just doesn't know where he is. The women tend to like things differently, and they represent the principle of movement dynamics. And so Bloom, bumping his head and so forth, undresses, and while he's undressing, we analyze the totality of his property and character and everything else. And finally, he comes to go to bed. Oh. Bloom's acts. He deposited the articles of clothing on a chair, removed his remaining articles of clothing, took from beneath the bolster at the head of the bed a folded long white nightshirt, inserted his head and arms into the proper apertures of the nightshirt, removed a pillow from the head to the foot of the bed, prepared the bed linen accordingly, and entered the bed. How? With circumspection, as invariably when entering an abode, his own or not his own. With solicitude, the snake spiral springs and the mattress being old, the brass quoits and pendant viper radii loose and tremulous under stress and strain. Prudently, as entering a lair or ambush of lust or adder, lightly, the less to disturb, reverently, the bed of conception and of birth, of consummation of marriage and of breach of marriage, of sleep and of death. What did his limbs, when gradually extended, encounter? New clean bed linen, additional odors, the presence of a human form, female, hers, the imprint of a human form, male, not his. Some crumbs, some flakes of potted milk recooked, which he removed. If he had smiled, now this is Odysseus coming home to the house with the suitors. He's got to kill the suitors. If he had smiled, why would he have smiled? To reflect that each one who enters imagines himself to be the first to enter, whereas he is always the last term of a preceding series, even if the first term of a succeeding one, each imagining himself to be first, last, only, and alone, whereas he is neither first, nor last, nor only, nor alone in a series originating in and repeated to infinity. What preceding series? And then we get a list of possible names of people with whom Molly has slept. What were his reflections concerning the last member of this series and late occupant of the bed? Reflections on his vigor, a bounder, corporal proportion, a bill sticker, commercial ability, a bester, impressionability, a boaster. Why, for the observer, impressionability, and then why this? With what antagonistic sentiments were his subsequent reflections affected? Envy, jealousy, abnegation, equanimity. Envy of a bodily and mental male organism specially adapted for the superincumbent posture of energetic human copulation and energetic piston and cylinder movement necessary for the complete satisfaction of a constant but not acute concupiscence resident in a bodily and mental female organism, passive but not obtuse. Jealousy, because a nature full and volatile in its free state was alternately the agent and reagent of attraction, because action between agents and reagents at all instants varied with inverse proportion of increase and decrease, with incessant circular extension and radial reentrance, because the controlled contemplation of the fluctuation of attraction produced, if desired, a fluctuation of pleasure. Abnegation, and so forth and so forth. Equanimity. Why more abnegation than jealousy? Less envy than equanimity. This is how Ulysses kills the suitors. From outrage, matrimony, to outrage, adultery, there arose naught but outrage, copulation. Yet the matrimonial violator of the matrimonially violated had not been outraged by the adulterous violator of the adulterously violated. What retribution, if any? Assassination? Never. Two rights don't make a wrong. Duel by combat? No. Divorce? Not now. Exposure by mechanical artifice, automatic bed, or individual testimony, concealed ocular witness? Not yet. Suit for damages by legal influence or simulation of assault with evidence of injuries sustained, self-inflicted? Not impossibly. If any, positively connivance, introduction of emulation, material or prosperous rival, and so forth, depreciation, and so forth. By what reflections did he, a conscious reactor against the void of incertitude, justify to himself his sentiments? The preordained frangibility of the hymen, the presupposed infrangibility of the thing in itself, the incongruity and disproportion between the self-prolonged tension of the thing proposed to be done and the self-abbreviating relaxation of the thing done, and so forth. He has killed them in his mind. And then comes a very interesting moment. He and Molly are in bed. Now, he's gotten in the bed upside down so that she's facing this way and he's facing that way. And the room is dark, but there's a little night lamp on the table beside them. When he gets in, Molly is awakened a little bit, and she asks, what are all this? And he just says he's late. He brought Stephen Daedalus in, Simon Daedalus' son, who didn't stay and is gone. And so they're about to go back to sleep again. What moved visibly above the listeners and the narrator's invisible thoughts? The upcast reflection of a lamp and shade, an inconstant series of concentric circles of varying gradations of light and shadow. Now, in Dante's Divine Comedy, when he comes to the beatific vision of the Trinity in heaven, three male figures, he sees behind them three great circles of light. Here we have the beatific vision of the male and female, the androgyne, the sacred androgyne, in bed, and above them are the circles, not perfect, inconstant. This is the earthly paradise equivalent of the vision of the beatific mystery. Joyce is giving it male and female, not a triad of male figures, such as we had at the beginning with the three fried eggs. Now we have male and female as his final image, and this is the image of man. In what directions, and this is the finale, in what directions did listener and narrator lie? The listener, southeast by east. The narrator, northwest by west. On the 53rd parallel of latitude north, 6th meridian of longitude west, at an angle of 45 degrees to the terrestrial equator. In what state of rest or motion? At rest relatively to themselves and to each other. In motion, being each and both carried westward, forward, and rearward, respectively, by the proper perpetual motion of the earth through the ever-changing tracks of never-changing space. In what posture? Listener, Molly, reclined semilaterally, left hand under head, right leg extended in a straight line and resting on left leg, flexed, in the attitude of Gaia Tellus, goddess earth, fulfilled, recumbent, big with seed. Narrator, reclined laterally left with right and left legs flexed, the index finger and thumb of the right hand resting on the bridge of the nose, in the attitude depicted on a snapshot photograph made by Percy Apjohn, the child man, weary, the man-child in the womb. Womb, weary, he rests. He has traveled with Sinbad the sailor, and Tinbad the tailor, and Jinbad the jailer, and Winbad the whaler, and Ninbad the nailer, and Finbad the failer, and Binbad the baler, and Pinpad the paler, and Minbad the mailer, and Hinbad the hailer, and Rinbad the railer, and Dinbad the caler, and Finbad the quailer, and Lindbad the yailer, and Sinbad the thaler. When? Going to dark bed, there was a square round Sinbad the sailor rocks ox egg in the night of the bed. Of all the ox of the rocks of dark in bed, the bright layer. Where? He's gone to sleep. And then he has gone to sleep, so to say, in Mali. And we have then the chapter for which most people bought the book, of Mali's monologue. Yes, because he never did a thing like that before. Is asked to get his breakfast in bed with a couple of eggs in City Arms Hotel when he used to be pretending to be laid up with a sick voice doing his highness and so forth. And she goes on and reviews her day with Blazes Boylan and then begins to realize something. She begins to think of Stephen as a possible lover and then thinks how refined he is, and this lets her feel how really gross these chaps have been with whom she's been enjoying herself, and then she begins to think, well, there's something of that fineness in Leo too. Poor chap, he really is tired, and I'll get up and get his breakfast in the morning. And when she's thinking of that, she thinks of the time when she first gave herself to him on Hoth Head under the rhododendrons, and this is the last passage of the book. Yes, first I get, oh well, I'll stop back here. The sun shines for you, he said, the day we were lying among the rhododendrons on Hoth Head, in the gray tweed suit and his straw hat, the day I got him to propose to me. Yes, first I gave him the bit of seed cake out of my mouth, and it was leap year, like now. Yes, 16 years ago. My God, after that long kiss, I near lost my breath. Yes, he said I was a flower of the mountain. Yes, so we are flowers, all a woman's body. Yes, that was one true thing he said in his life. And the sun shines for you today. Yes, that was why I liked him, because I saw he understood or felt what a woman is, and I knew I could always get round him. And I gave him all the pleasure I could, leading him on till he asked me to say yes. And I wouldn't answer first, only looked out over the sea and the sky. I was thinking of so many things he didn't know, of Mulvey and Mr. Stanhope and Hester and Father and old Captain Groves and the sailors playing All Birds Fly and I Say Stoop and washing up dishes, they called it, on the pier, and the sentry in front of the governor's house with the thing round his white helmet, poor devil, half roasted, and because she comes from Gibraltar, and the Spanish girls laughing in their shawls and their tall combs, and the auctions in the morning, the Greeks and the Jews and the Arabs and the devil knows who else from all ends of Europe, and Duke Street, and the fowl market all clucking inside Larby Sharon's, and the poor donkeys slipping half asleep, and the vague fellows in the cloaks asleep in the shade on the steps, and the big wheels of the carts of the bulls, and the old castle, thousands of years old. Yes, and those handsome Moors, all in white and turbans like kings, asking you to sit down in their little bit of a shop, and Runda with the old windows at the posadas, glancing eyes, a lattice hid, for her lover to kiss the iron, and the wine shops half open at night, and the castanets, and the night we missed the boat at Algeciras, the watchman going about serene with his lamp, and oh, that awful deep down torrent, oh, and the sea, crimson sometimes like fire, and the glorious sunsets and the fig trees in the Alameda Gardens, yes, and all the queer little streets and pink and blue and yellow houses and the rose gardens and the jessamine and geraniums and cactuses and Gibraltar as a girl where I was a flower of the mountain. Yes, when I put the rose in my hair like the Andalusian girls used, or shall I wear a red? Yes, and how he kissed me under the Moorish wall, and I thought, well, as well him as another. And then I asked him with my eyes to ask again, yes. And then he asked me would I say yes, to say yes, my mountain flower. And first I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts, all perfume, yes. And his heart was going like mad, and yes, I said, yes, I will, yes. And there's about 20 yeses in 2 pages, and when this book was first reviewed, it was said to be a negative book. So, well, we've all said yes, you see, and given ourselves. She has given herself her way, he gave himself his way, Stephen has given himself his way, and we're melting now into that wonderful ocean and all these memories, and she thinking of Gibraltar even while she's thinking of the rhododendrons and those men and this one and all that. It all melts into one big dominant experience. And so after we've had that couple of, an hour and a half or so of recovering from all this, I'll do a final little session with Finnegan here, and we'll try to have lots of fun at Finnegan's wake. All right? All right, thank you.
Well, if you be the less of a grin, as I suppose you to be, come give me the last token between you and me.
Ah, Gregory, don't you remember that night on the hill when we swapped rings off each other's hands, surely against my will? Mine was of the beaten gold, yours but black tin. Yes, mine was of the beaten gold, yours but black tin.
Well, if you be the less of a grin, as I suppose you to be, come give me the last token between you and me.
Ah, Gregory, don't you remember that night on the hill when we swapped rings off each other's hands, surely against my will? Mine was of the beaten gold, yours but black tin. Yes, mine was of the